Hello, welcome back. Honda Hornet cb600 brake pad change today. Now, to be fair, this change is very similar to the Bandit that I did not long ago. So it's a very similar video. It's got the same retaining screw on it, which are always hard to undo because people don't grease them. But I will grease it afterwards. If you really have to, you can drill them out. 9 times out of 10 it's fine. They're only ready to stop dust and crap going in, but as long as you grease in there, then there's no huge issue. But I'm going to be doing both sides. I've got the new brake pads here, and I'm going to be showing you step by step roughly what we do. So the first thing we're going to do on both sides is get this screw out so that we can get access to the retaining pin which actually holds the brake pads in. So on this occasion they came out fairly easily with a light tap of the hammer. What you do now is spray loads of WD-40 or any kind of lubricant in there. Give it a couple of minutes to sit in. That will help you with the next stage. Next stage is an Allen key, and I showed you last time how to do these using a breaker bar if needed, so I'm going to be using the same system again. So both the retaining screws loosened using a simple Allen key. These calipers have been looked after and not long serviced because they've obviously been greased. What's hard to work out is why the pads weren't changed. The pads are possibly they possibly have more grip on them than it looks like. So I'll whack one of these calipers off and have a good look. It might just be that the piston itself needs a good grease and clean, and the pads are okay, but I have a new set of pads anyway, so I'll see how bad them ones are. Now that we've got the main retaining pin loose, we can now loosen up these two nuts, pull that off completely, because we know that the other pins are loose and ready to come out, to have a really good look at what's inside. So everything's hand tight now. I can take it off. This is where we really see what's going on inside the caliper. So first thing to notice is that it's quite stuck on there. That means there's a chance this one's fairly seized on. It will loosen up when you just wiggle it a bit and maybe give it a tap. But that gives you an idea of what state the pistons are in. If you wiggle it left and right, that should put them back in a little bit, the pistons. It's very, very dirty in there, absolutely caked. I can see grease, it's definitely greased, but someone's done a quick temporary grease job on that. I have to loosen up the bracket as well. It's going to need to be pulled out and greased. So the pads are quite low. They probably would have passed, but they're fairly low. But the main thing here is it needs taking off, and it needs cleaning. The pistons need cleaning properly and looking at. Let's drop the pistons. The pads. Always check the pin. It will need cleaning and a little bit of grease. Not enough to fall onto the pads though. Cleaning and greasing in there. It's not too bad, but it didn't have enough movement. Now these pistons are greased, but it's definitely a quick job. They need to be cleaner than that. First thing I'm going to do with all of this is push the pistons out a touch using the brake itself, and then brake cleaner everywhere. Get this as clean as possible for now. I'm not going to show you that bit, there's no point. So I've cleaned the pistons a little. Now the next step is to check how full the fluid is, because people fill up the reservoir with dot 4, dot 5, whatever they're using, dot 3, and they don't wonder why it's been going down. They don't ask themselves like where the fluid's going. This fluid doesn't evaporate, it doesn't disappear. It goes down because the pads get so thin. Now, yes, you do have to top it up until you're ready to change the pads, but this explains why we then have to look in here, check how full it is, and drain some out if necessary. So that's not too bad. I should have room to push the fluid back enough to put the new pads in. Always worth checking though. So the pistons themselves are pushed back. Should be pushed back enough now to be able to get the new pads in. I've greased them with WD this time. Now what we need to do is clean and grease. CV grease will do these pivots, and you do the same on the plates. Clean it, I've already cleaned it, and you grease it, and then you slide it back in and you make sure it's got movement. That way, as the pads move sizes, it won't be wearing out on one side or the other. These are designed to do something, and that's what they're designed to do, stop the pads wearing down on one side instead of on both. So you need to make sure that these aren't seized and that they're greased, so that they slide in and out and they've got a fair bit of movement. Don't lose the rubber. One fell off, this one here fell off. All you do is push it back on, and that's the next step. So the next step is to get that back on, and then I'll throw the new pads in, clean and grease. I'm going to grease the threads. I'm not actually going to grease the pin, maybe some WD, but I'm going to grease the thread so that the next service is easily doable. It's always good to do that. Someone must have done that last time for me, although I wish they'd changed the pads. So yes, that's the next step. Look at that. That's exactly how it should be. It's meant to move. Great. So the pads are here. I've got a top tip for you. When I Google Honda Hornet brake pads. These pads come up and they cost £20 for the set. Now, somewhere in the listing it will say a number. It's normally like FA299 or something. If you then go back and just on eBay just check that number, FA999, these pads came up at £6 a pair. So you know you're saving £8 there. Well worth doing, just because it doesn't say Honda next to it. Now the £20 ones were not original Honda pads, they were these ones. It's just that because they were sold specific to the bike, they were more money. So the pads are in and nipped up now. I'm going to have to make enough space for the disc to go into. Now I'm not going to pry on the rubber pads because that will ruin them. I can go down the side here to get a bit more room, or I can go back against here very gently and slowly to get more room, keeping your eye on the reservoir because the reservoir will be raising every time you push the piston back. So I'm going to make a gap here without pressing on the pads themselves. So the pads slid on fine, they should be fairly loose now because it's all clean and greased. Now before you do anything else at this stage, in fact I'm going to pull them off and I'm going to brake clean them just to make sure no contaminants. That's what it's for. And then it should easily just slide back on. If you aim it right, there you go. And you should start nipping up the bolts. What I'm not going to do at this stage is press the brakes because I'm doing the other side as well. So I want to make sure I've done both sides before I nip everything up and start testing and messing with the brakes. So that's one side done. Great. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the other side. I'm not going to record it, there's no need. Then I'm going to check the level of the fluids, the brake fluids. Once both brake pads are changed, it's all greased and the level's okay, I'll be pressing the brakes, making sure they engage and disengage. And now on this bike with new brake pads, the brakes will be okay, but it normally takes around 100 miles for the brake pads to wear in. So you don't have to do anything, you just have to be aware that the front brakes aren't at their absolute best for roughly 100 miles. You can do some things to help it along. You can press on the brakes gently sometimes while running along. You can use your front brakes a little bit more just to kind of help them bed in. But that's all you're doing. You're taking away the top layer of the actual friction pad and you're just helping them bed in at this stage. So there you go. I'll do the other side, I'll let you know how that's going, and we'll come back to the bike at the end. So that's it, right side's done, was very quick and easy. Very lightly greased, in fact only using WD-40 on the pistons themselves, pushed them back, made sure they were, you know, flowing, and then fully cleaned them with brake cleaner afterwards to make sure there's no leftover residue of WD or any other grease. Lots of people kind of frown upon any grease on the calipers, but I just find that when I don't grease them and I come back a year later, they're such a pain and they're in such bad condition. So I always put some light sort of grease on. That's kind of up to you. This is a tutorial on how to do it if you want to do it at home and save yourself a few pounds. At this stage, check the reservoir. Now this fluid is quite dark. Brake goes all the way in. Press it a few times. The pistons are going to have to come out. All four will have to come out and engage. You might have one or two engaging first, then the other two will follow. There you go. It might take a little while to get that fully pumped. Fluid wise, that's very dark. We should should really be changing that and flushing that through. Some fluids are darker than others, so it may not necessarily be terrible. Okay, yeah, we'll see how that goes, but for now the brakes are done, and it will take roughly 100 miles for them to bed in, so that's all good. This bike should be ready for an MOT. It's got a month left on it, maybe a bit longer, but I'll get a year's MOT because it's going to be sold. It's a very, very nice bike, this one. It's extremely smooth. If you have any questions or you want any help with your own bikes and projects, then please let me know. I'm in central London, so I'm always willing to help people out, especially if I can record it. I may even be able to come to you, depending on how far you are, to help you out with your projects. I think that would be quite nice. So if you want any help with your projects, and you think I can help, and you know I can try, then give me a shout. You never know, I might be able to. So that's it today for this bike. The brakes are fine, they're not binding, they're working well. The front brake does not touch the handlebar. That's an MOT failure if you put it in and it touches the handlebar. It's a stunning bike. I'm not sure if you guys have heard it. It sounds really nice. That's the original exhaust. It's not too loud. It's a very smooth bike. The downpipes and exhaust are practically brand new. Tyres are good. Front brake's just been done, obviously. Rear brakes are quite low, but should pass an MOT. Doesn't overheat. Rides perfectly. Got lots of extras. The pyramid front screen, rear mudguard, and the Givey box and rack is £300 on its own. So this is a great bike for someone.